The shadow of the past. In the depths of the hospital's darkest ward, I sat beside my grandfather's bed. The only sound, the faint hum of the life support machines. The air was heavy with the stench of decay, and the flickering fluorescent lights above cast eerie shadows on the walls. "Kiddo," he whispered, his voice like a rusty gate creaking in the wind. "I got something to tell you." I leaned in close, my heart racing with anticipation. "What is it, Grandpa?" He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling with the effort. "I was involved in a ritual many years ago. A young woman was sacrificed, and I helped cover it up." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My grandfather, the man I'd always admired and respected, was capable of such a horrific act? "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, trying to process my emotions. Grandpa's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, kiddo. I'm so sorry. I've carried this guilt with me for so long, and I don't want to take it to my grave." I looked at my grandfather, seeing him in a new light. I felt a mix of emotions: shock, anger, sadness, and compassion. "Grandpa," I said, my voice soft, "I forgive you, but I need to ask you something." "What's that, kiddo?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you want me to reveal the truth, or keep your secret safe?" Grandpa's face contorted in a mixture of pain and relief. "Please, kiddo, keep my secret safe. I don't want to hurt anyone else with my mistakes." I nodded, feeling a weight settle upon my shoulders. "I'll keep your secret, Grandpa. But promise me one thing." "What's that, kiddo?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Promise me you'll find peace. Finally. You've carried this burden for so long. It's time to let it go." Grandpa's eyes filled with tears again, and he nodded, a small smile on his lips. "I promise, kiddo. I'll find peace. Finally." As I sat there, holding my grandfather's hand, I knew that I would keep his secret safe, but I also knew that I would carry the weight of that secret with me forever. The darkness closed in around us, and I could feel the presence of the unknown, lurking just beyond the edge of perception. I knew that I had to make a choice: to reveal the truth, or to keep the secret hidden. And as I looked into my grandfather's eyes, I knew that I would choose the latter. For in the world of shadows and secrets, sometimes the truth is better left unspoken. The machines surrounding us beeped and whirred, a constant reminder of my grandfather's mortality. I looked at him, seeing the pain and guilt etched on his face. "Grandpa," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I'll keep your secret safe. But promise me one thing." "What's that, kiddo?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Promise me you'll find peace. Finally. You've carried this burden for so long. It's time to let it go." Grandpa's eyes filled with tears again, and he nodded, a small smile on his lips. "I promise, kiddo. I'll find peace. Finally." As the darkness closed in around us, I knew that I would keep his secret safe. But I also knew that I would carry the weight of that secret with me forever. And as I looked into my grandfather's eyes, I saw something that chilled me to the bone, a glimmer of evil, a spark of malevolence that seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. I knew then that I had made a terrible mistake. I had promised to keep my grandfather's secret safe, but I had no idea what horrors that secret might unleash. As the machines surrounding us beeped and whirred, I knew that I was trapped in a living nightmare with no escape in sight. Here is a prequel to the story. Origins, New Orleans, 1955. Etienne Lafleur, a young and ambitious occultist, stood in the dimly lit chamber, surrounded by the members of the mysterious Order of the Red Hand. The air was thick with the scent of incense and something else, something darker. "Brothers and sisters," Etienne began, his voice dripping with conviction, "we stand at the threshold of a new era, an era of power, of knowledge, of transcendence." The members of the Order nodded in agreement, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. "But to achieve this goal," Etienne continued, "we must be willing to make sacrifices, to push the boundaries of what is acceptable, of what is human." The members of the Order murmured among themselves, their voices filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Etienne raised his hands, and the room fell silent. "I propose that we perform the ritual of the Red Hand," he said, his voice dripping with anticipation. "A ritual that will grant us the power to transcend the limitations of the human form." The members of the Order nodded in agreement, and Etienne began to outline the details of the ritual. As the night wore on, the members of the Order prepared for the ritual, their movements filled with a sense of urgency and anticipation. And Etienne, the young and ambitious occultist, stood at the center of it all, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. The ritual began, and the members of the Order chanted and swayed, their voices and movements building to a crescendo of power and energy. And at the center of it all, Etienne stood, his eyes fixed on the young woman who was to be the sacrifice. The ritual reached its climax, and the young woman screamed as Etienne plunged the dagger into her heart. The members of the Order cheered and chanted, their voices filled with a sense of triumph and power. And Etienne, the young and ambitious occultist, stood at the center of it all, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. But as the ritual came to a close, Etienne felt a sense of unease, a sense of guilt and regret. He looked down at the young woman's lifeless body, and he knew that he had made a terrible mistake. The ritual may have granted him power, but it had also cursed him with a guilt that would haunt him for the rest of his life. And as Etienne walked away from the ritual chamber, he knew that he would never be able to escape the shadow of the past. Lessons from my shadow dreams. It was storming, the sky a slab of slate with swollen thunderclouds crowding its expanse, each nudging for room. A wicked, unrelenting wind whipped chestnut hair into my eyes and mouth. Pulling it out of my face, I looked at the desolation surrounding me. Empty air met me in every direction. I don't know where I am, I realize, as the panic starts to set in, and my breathing turns shallow and rapid. On my hands and knees, kneeling on what appears to be sand made from stardust, I take a calming breath and rise until I'm standing. What is this place? Where am I? The last thing I remember is going to bed, my lids shutting to the lavender of my walls as I slowly drifted off to sleep. Not knowing what else to do, I started walking, and that's when the voices began and the shadows formed. At first, it was small. It was subtle. A whisper here, a mutter there, voices that got louder as I trudged on. I struggled against the wind, hugging my arms to myself, each hand gripping an elbow until my knuckles turned white as chalk. As I walked, the black, star-lit sand at my feet began to rise with the wind, forming shadowy figures that strode alongside me, the overlapping voices tumbling from their open mouths. I watched in morbid fascination, my feet slowing as their dark forms became recognizable, their faces slowly morphing into a colorless version of the faces I know. On my right was my mother, a horrendous, nightmare version of my mother, her blue eyes dark as coal, and her face twisted with malice. What are you doing? Really, Midge? Are you fucking stupid? What's wrong with you? Came from the cavern that was her mouth. My eyes went wide, fear and pain forming as tears that threatened to spill. You're not good enough. Why would I want to touch you? You're not what I want. Came from my left, and my head whipped to see an equally nightmarish version of my ex. At this point, my feet had slowed until I was almost at a complete stop. More and more, figures from both my past and present began to form and dance around me, each hurling their own unique version of verbal awfulness. With each invisible blow, I shrunk until I was crouched on the shifting sand, Hands splayed over my face to cover sight and sound. I squeezed my eyes, silently begging for it to end, for the voices and noise and all the venom of the world to stop. "Midge, breakfast?" I gasped, jolting awake to my mom's voice calling from the kitchen. As reality settled in, a sick dread pooled in my gut at the vague nightmare I'd left behind. "It was a bad dream, Midge. Just a bad dream," I mumbled to myself as I rubbed the sleep from my eyes. I tramped downstairs, the thick soles of my boots making loud thuds on each carpet-covered step. I slid into a distressed wooden chair at our equally distressed dining table that doubled as our breakfast nook. As I shoved eggs in my mouth, scrambled just how my mom knows I like it, I thought about our history exam today with rising anxiety. I was not the best at memorizing details, like dates or times, and last night Amy had another drama round with her douche of a boyfriend. My mom sat across from me, early morning sunlight streaming in from the window sink, sipping coffee from the chipped Mom of the Year mug I got her for Christmas last year, before Dad left. Before it all fell apart, we sat together in silence. She analyzed me over her mug as I finished off my butter-soaked toast. "You okay, honey? You seem stressed," she asked with a slight tilt of her head. I nibbled my toast while staring at my plate, not wanting to admit how egregiously unprepared I was for the day's exam, or the nightmare I'd endured that clung to me like static. It felt like I was seeing reality underwater, my senses warbled and muffled, making everything as impactful as an echo. My mom cleared her throat, snapping me out of my reverie. "Midge?" she asked, her gaze holding concern as lines formed between her dark brows. "I'm okay, just not as ready for my exam today as I'd like to be," I answered simply. The truth was, I wasn't ready at all for anything. My mom pursed her lips and narrowed her eyes, a clear sign she knew I was lying. To be fair, technically, I really was worried about the exam today, but I also was still disturbed by my nightmare, which stuck to me like a dark, immovable shroud. And it being my parents' divorce anniversary didn't exactly help. As if sensing my thoughts, my mom's eyes darted to the calendar on our white linoleum fridge, absolutely covered with magnets and pamphlets or flyers. Instantly, her gaze softened when she recognized the date. "Hey, it's gonna be okay, baby. I know today will be hard, but you'll be okay. Plus, your father is still coming for a family dinner this Friday," she said with a quirk of her mouth, as if that should excite me, as if that fixed everything. I simply nodded as I tried to swallow my last bite of toast, which had turned to sandpaper in my throat. "Gotta go, Mom. Thanks for breakfast." Before she could answer, I quickly grabbed my backpack and was out the door. I sat in history, staring blankly at the open-ended questions in front of me. Mr. Sikowitz sat at his desk in the front of the class, hunched over papers he was likely grading for a different set of students, his red pen lightly roving and marking with steadfast eyes. I looked back down at the unanswered prompts in front of me and felt my heart start to quicken. Gods, I'm screwed. Dad would be so disappointed, I thought with increasing fear. My breathing became slightly uneven, and with the panic, my nightmare from the night before reached towards the front of my mind. This was the last thing I needed. But it seemed the more I tried to repress the images and the memory, the harder they fought back. Shadows began to gather at the edge of my vision. That same smoky, starlit sand from the dream clustering along my peripheral. I blinked hard 2 or 3 times while keeping my head down, trying to force this contorted melding out of existence through sheer denial, but to no avail. The darkness stayed, slowly and with threatening dread. The dregs of my nightmare creeped towards my desk until it surrounded me on every side. I briefly darted my eyes around the room, desperate to find some reaction, any recognition from my classmates of the nightmare unfolding. But I was left wanting. The line between dream and reality was paper thin, blurring further as the familiar wraith-like figures began to swirl upwards and form, then shattered entirely as my nightmare came to life. My mother was again on my right, with a mouth black as pitch and her blue eyes drained of color once more. "What makes you think you can do this, Midge? Answer me, Midge. What's wrong with you? Are you fucking stupid?" she hissed as her ghastly form drifted towards my ear, her teeth gnashing with each syllable. It wasn't exactly the same as the nightmare, but it was damn similar. Now my father, in his trademark suit and tie, took shape in front of me, causing me to flick my gaze upwards. Looking was a mistake. His usually coiffed hair laid limply on his head. His eyes were endless black holes, and he stood with his arms crossed, intimidating and unmovable despite his form. His slightly transparent clothes were rumpled and worn, which wasn't like him at all. And he looked at me with a face of disgust and hatred as I'd never known. At least, not from him. "Grow up, Midge. What's your problem? Why can't you just get this right?" he shouted, somehow slamming his not-so-solid hand on my desk, causing me to jump to my feet with a yelp, my chair making a loud crash as collateral. "Ms. Sloan, can I help you with something?" My head whipped over to Mr. Sikowitz, and just like that, as I met his dark brown eyes, the spell was broken. I looked around and realized that the echo of my nightmare had vanished, and all eyes were on me. as if deciding if they needed to grab the straitjacket now or later. I audibly swallowed. No, sorry, Mr. Sikovitz, I said, as I haphazardly righted my chair off the ground and sat while keeping my head and eyes firmly down, my dark hair creating a curtain on either side of my pallid face. The rest of the day passed in an anxiety-filled blur. At every turn and every corner, I looked for the shadows, waited for the starlit sand to reappear, and inch along the edge of my vision, anticipating the god-awful convergence of my nightmare and reality. But it never did. I stared out the bus window on the way home, watching the rain spatter the glass in large, heavy drops. "Hi, honey," my mom hollered from the kitchen when she heard me walk through the door, her voice warm and rich over the cold I felt in my bones, like a homespun blanket. Our house was a pretty open floor plan, with the kitchen slightly sectioned off, but having two large archways on either end of its L-shaped design. I watched her through this opening for a moment, trying to reconcile the nightmare version of her I saw at school with the flesh and blood in front of me. She was currently unloading the dishwasher, and when her hello was met with silence, she turned to look at me, her arm pausing briefly as she made to put away a plate. Her face scrunched, and she immediately put the dish on the counter. "What's wrong, honey? Did something happen at school?" I tried to speak. I tried to open my mouth to tell her about all of it, but nothing would come except tears that began to blur my vision. "Oh, honey," my mom said, as she strode over to me, crossing the distance in 3 or 4 strides due to her unfairly long legs. I let her hug me, soaked up the feeling of being wrapped in her arms, and for a solid couple of minutes, we stood in the entryway like that. I reveled in her warmth, the sensation of her solid arms around me, and memorized every detail that made her real, keeping contact with a hand on my shoulder. She guided me to the couch where we sat, knees angled towards each other. "Honey, what is it?" she asked. I looked at her, and at first I could only stutter. As I struggled to form coherent words, I felt my anxiety and panic start to rise. The shadows were at the edge of my vision again, causing my breathing to turn rapid and shallow. "Honey?" my mom asked, leaning closer. I could barely hear her, barely see her over the pounding of my own heart. "Midge," my mom said, a bit louder now, giving my leg a slight shake as she placed her hand on my knee. The shadows and the darkness were beginning to take shape now, starlit sand rolling across the ground as it crept ever closer. Tears pooled along my lids, causing my vision to blur. Suddenly, warm, soft hands enclosed my face, and my mom's face, my real mom's face, swam in front of me. "Midge," she seemed to say in almost a whisper. Look at me, she said, increasing the pressure around my head. "You are not broken, okay? I don't know exactly what you're seeing, but it's not real, okay? I'm real. I'm here," she said, taking the limp hand from my lap and gently placing it over her heart. I felt the softness of her wool sweater under my fingertips, like touching a cloud made of silk. I focused on her eyes, blue, just like they were supposed to be. Your mom's, right here, Midge, right here. Not that ghoulish thing of nightmares, I thought to myself, as the vile shadow, puppeting as her pushed and crowded closer along my peripheral. That's it, baby. I'm right here. Breathe, honey. Breathe with me. Focus on my voice, on my face. I'm right here, she said with a squeeze of my fingers, as she had removed her hands from my head and was now holding my own in her lap, her gaze unwavering. I took a steadying breath. Just breathe, Midge. That's all you have to do. Just breathe. I counted to 10 as I inhaled, and did the same on the exhale as my mom, keeping hold of my hands, did the same. That's it, honey. Breathe. Just breathe. 10 in and 10 out. You can do this. I nodded, and as I expanded my lungs in and out, feeling my pulse start to slow, blessedly, the shadows began to ebb, receding from the edge of my vision. The grotesque, half-formed versions of my loved ones melting and fading away, bit by bit. By about the 5th or 6th of these exercises, the nightmare was all but gone, the shadows having slunk back to whatever hellish mindscape they belonged to. There she is, my mom said with relief, seeing my eyes clear and the panic gone, a slight smile playing on her lips. I crumpled, burying my head into her chest with small sobs. "Oh, honey," she let out softly, stroking the top of my head as only a mom can. "Has this happened before?" she asked gently. I lied, shaking my head slightly as I kept it tucked into the crook of her arm. Gods, her sweater felt like the softest pillow. I soaked up the comfort. Do you know why your father left?" I whipped my head up, pushing out of her arms, taken aback by the subject change. Realizing I wasn't going to answer her, she continued, but her face took on a faraway look, as if trying to see through the smog of time to the not-so-distant past. Our family, both the men and the women, have always struggled to master themselves. We have the curse of extreme feeling, of intangible emotions strong enough to drown countries. And for some of us, that leaks into our dreams. And then, sometimes, those dreams, usually the darkest of nightmares, leak into our reality. She shifted her focus back to me and asked with a tilt of her head, "Do you understand what I'm saying, Midge?" "No, not really," I mumbled, swallowing and tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. My mom leaned forward, using her thumbs to wipe away my residual tears, and took my hands in hers. "Honey, what were you feeling? What did you see?" she asked, her blue eyes piercing. I don't know," I said, avoiding her gaze. "I was sitting in class, trying to take my test, and, well, I wasn't sure of some answers. And then I was thinking about Dad, and I panicked. Then the nightmare started. But no one else could see it, just me." At this, I raised my head to look at her with wide eyes, searching for answers or preparing for a straitjacket, whichever came first. My mom pursed her lips, seeming to debate how much she should or shouldn't say. I saw the moment she decided to bear all, clear as day. "Honey, you were experiencing a moment of extreme emotion, of anxiety and fear, maybe panic. And sometimes those things can make us forget who we are, or even where we are. For the few in our family who have a very special heart, our emotions can cause our worst fears or worst anxieties to come to life. It usually takes an extreme or traumatic event. And given today's date," she trailed off, her eyes going distant again. After a moment, with a shake of her head, she returned her attention to me. She made to speak, but I stopped her before she could get a word out. "What happened with Dad?" I asked. My mom silently opened and closed her mouth, clearly struggling with what to say or how to say it. "When it happened to me while I was with your father, he thought I had gone half mad. Mine was a nightmare too, a wretched one that had me crouched in the corner like a rabid animal. Once we learned of our family history and what some of us have to deal with, he decided he didn't want to stay with someone who couldn't trust her own emotions, her own feelings, whose reality and dreams tended to mix and meld until they were one and the same." My mom's voice got progressively softer as she spoke, until it was barely above a mere whisper. "I'm so sorry, Mom," I said, taking hold of her hands and squeezing her palms. "That's all right, sweetie," she responded with a grimace, tucking another strand of chocolate brown hair behind my ear. "You know why?" Her eyes twinkled mischievously. My brow scrunched as I tried to find anything good in what had so far transpired, or what I'd been told. "Because," my mom said, clearly seeing I was coming up empty, "it's not just the bad dreams our hearts can bring to life." She smiled, placing a hand upon my cheek, rubbing small circles against my skin with her thumb. "It's the good ones, too. Go to its circle. Let's keep pretending I whispered those 3 words with a slight slur, the buzz of 2 champagne cocktails still churning through my veins. The air was thick with that sleepy summertime vibe, bugs buzzing and crickets chirping their seasonal symphony. I tucked a copper-colored curl behind my ear and squeezed Nick's hand tighter as we strolled through the canopied streets, the golden sunlight still warm on our shoulders. At dinner, we had joked about being rich retirees, just stopping for a quick bite before returning to our yacht for a summer soiree. Sweetheart, you can be whoever you want to be, Nick grinned, slowing down his lanky stride to steady my swaying steps. In fact, I have a surprise for you. Follow me. We interlaced our fingers and ascended the hill towards Cotuit Circle. Backed by a ridge of evergreen, the house stood out amongst the newly renovated mansions, its creamy white woodwork and deep sage trim, a charming reflection of timeless architecture. Despite being worn and weathered, the house seemed to boast of its own importance, like a royal battleship returning from war. The setting sunlight sparkled off the towering, tapered windows that flanked each side of the entryway. Fragrant honeysuckle climbed the porch railings in intricate swirls, weaving in, out, and around each delicately carved post. I ran my fingers along the smooth address welded into the bars of the gate. 3, 5, 4. Cotuit Circle. Ka-tuet. I love saying those words, I murmured to myself. Click. Nick opened the gate with a grand flourish. Today, on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, we are touring Gemma Grant's opulent Cotuit Circle home, champagne wishes and caviar dreams and all that jazz. Nicholas, whose house is this? I fixed a broken pipe here last week. The old lady is gone for the summer. Stop stressing. It's fine. I hesitated. Nick tilted his head in a knowing glance that wordlessly implied, trust me. I exhaled deeply to calm my nerves and stretched my arms overhead. Shit. Ow! I moaned as my thumb caught on a thorn from the crimson, rose-lined trellis. A tiny trickle of red snaked down my wrist. I pressed my thumb to my lips and rolled my eyes. I'm fine, I murmured. Nick kissed my hand and guided me through the gate to the front door. He entered the same code into the panel above the door handle, and it creaked open. The essence of the interior washed over me. A stale bouquet of black tea, sugared orange cookies, dried lavender, and my grandmother's mille fleur perfume. My throat burned. I steadied myself against the velvet damask-covered wall and struggled to appear composed. Do you smell that? I whispered. Old lady perfume and dust? Yeah, a little. We can leave if you're nervous, but I swear no one is here. I shook my head. and hurriedly wiped my watery eyes. "No, show me around," I managed to utter. The house oozed opulence. Thick ruby-red rugs with dizzying geometric patterns covered the chestnut wood floors. Centered in the middle of the entryway was a grand staircase that spiraled up to the second-story landing. Ornate sconces and buttery yellow candles marked the walls. I ran my hand along the carved banister and watched the closing streaks of golden sunlight glitter down through the narrow windows. The central parlor overflowed with collectibles, built-in bookcases full of gold leaf books, decorative lamps, and miniature figurines. Shadows danced along the walls in a forlorn choreography. But despite the soaring high ceilings, the interior appeared to be suffocating itself. There was no room to breathe. "Jem, look, your favorite." Nick appeared completely unaware of the existential crisis brewing inside me as he placed the needle on a vintage Victrola and sauntered toward me. Billie Holiday's voice filled the room. "I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places." I wrapped my arms around Nick's neck, laid my head on his chest, and tried to ignore my rising apprehension. Tick, tick, tick. The second hand on the grandfather clock marked the rhythm of our movement. "I am so pleased you've arrived," a voice rang out. As the record player screeched to a stop, I froze. The known voice resonated deep within me. A gaunt, withered hand delicately placed the record needle to the side. The woman's frail body was stooped over like a wilting blossom. Spotted skin stretched tightly over her bones like sheer sheets of tissue paper. "Mrs. Danforth, I am so sorry. My wife has always wanted to tour one of the Cotuit Circle homes, and I knew she'd especially love to see yours. We didn't mean to intrude. We're going." Nick spoke hurriedly, with his head bowed down. "Nonsense, Nicholas. What a jest. You certainly know I was expecting you both. I'll make us some tea." Her voice clanged out like crystal, delicate and precise, inconsistent with her shriveled appearance. I watched her curved form stagger toward the kitchen door and felt like I was grasping at the last shreds of a dream that would soon be forgotten. I didn't know her, or did I? I began to mouth, "What the—" to Nick as he grabbed my hand and led me toward the door. The hearty voice resonated from deep within the kitchen. "Nicholas, can you see to the water faucet in the powder room again? It's no longer leaking, but I cannot seem to get the water hot." Nick shrugged and dropped my hand. "She's old and confused. Have a cup of tea and we'll go. It'll only take me a few minutes to fix the water. Do not leave me alone with her." I shut my eyes and begged. When I opened them, he was already gone. The tea kettle released a shrill squeal, and seconds later, she shuffled out. A stack of cookies and 2 porcelain cups of tea sloshing over on a delicate tray. "Take a seat, love," she said sweetly, as she set the tray on the table and shakily handed me a cup. I positioned myself on the edge of the velvet amethyst couch and ran my finger along the sage ivy swirls of the teacup. I watched the steam rise, desperate to avoid eye contact. "Oh dear, looks like the roses snagged you too," she observed as she held her hand next to mine. Along her thumb was a shiny white scar, identical to the thin red cut on mine. I winced. "Please have a cookie. They are delightful with this tea." I picked up the iced orange cookie and inhaled deeply. I love orange cookies. "I know, it's your favorite recipe," she replied. A trickle of sweat ran down the back of my neck. This old lady was definitely unhinged. "Thank you for your kindness, but we should be leaving. It's getting late." I glanced at the clock once more. The second hand appeared frozen in time. "Oh, shush. The night is young. I even pulled some books off the shelf this morning to show you." I wondered if she would find it rude if I pulled out my phone and texted Nick to hurry the hell up. She slid a stack of leather-bound books across the table and slinked so close to me that our knees touched. The proximity of her presence made me uneasy. I set the teacup and cookie back on the tray, picked up the top book, and crossed my legs away from her. "So, Mrs. Danforth, what do you read?" "Words, words, words," she smirked. I raised my eyebrows to acknowledge her reference. My mind flooded with long-forgotten quotes. "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." I opened the book. "Oh, this is a photo album. Is this you and your family?" My shoulders relaxed as I slowly turned the pages. The photos all had the same muted rust color that designated the passage of time. The images captured a variety of milestones: lake vacations, ski trips, vintage cars, graduations, and birthday parties. Smiling, happy people. "Yes, dear. Long before I lived here on Cotuit Circle. Ka-tu-et. I love saying those words," she mused. Her unnerving remark made me shiver. I set the album on the table and stood to find Nick, but something caught my eye. The album opened to an entire page of a little girl in lavender-striped pajamas, copper-colored curls. I leaned down and flipped the pages faster and faster. The little girl appeared everywhere. Her first day of school, the day she got her ears pierced, the time she fell out of a tree and fractured her wrist. The little girl was me. The saccharine voice soured into a hoarse whisper. "Let's keep pretending. To the person who buys my house. Months ago, I uprooted my entire life and moved across the country with very little plan. My wife left me out of the blue. With no tether, I cashed out my 401k and threw caution to the wind. I drove until I saw snow before deciding to try out the small town life. After nailing down a full-time job and growing tired of life in the town's only hotel, I reached out to a realtor and asked her to show me the house that's been on the market the longest. A fixer-upper was just what I needed. The realtor didn't have much information on the home outside of the basics, but I was sold as soon as I saw it. 3 stories, isolated deep in the woods. What more could a man looking to start over with a project ask for? After closing, I was given a fill folder containing all the important information. With all the standard documents was a handwritten letter from the previous homeowner. The contents of the letter have me questioning if I made the right choice, but I've never been one to turn down a challenge. I have typed the contents of the letter below. To the person who buys my house, congratulations on the purchase of your new home. Or perhaps, should I say, you're welcome for your new home. I can only imagine what type of person you may be. A first-time home buyer? A newlywed couple just starting out? A growing family looking for more space? A retiree longing to be away from the hustle and bustle of the city? Or even just an investor looking for rental properties? The possibilities are endless, but no less exciting. Just as exciting as when my late husband and I first purchased the property so many years ago. The tree covering so far off the main road made such a serene setting. We just couldn't picture ourselves living anywhere else. However, all things must come to an end. Such is life. I'm not as young as I once was. My children worried for me out here all alone. Or so they say. My oldest daughter decided the property was too much for me to care for on my own anymore, and encouraged me to move to the old folks' home in the next town. As loath as I was to leave the home we spent such wonderful years in, I could no longer argue with her. The upkeep was getting to be a little much for these old bones. I agreed on one condition: that the home not be put up for sale until my death. So, if you are receiving this letter, I have shuffled off this mortal coil. That also means that the house has most likely sat vacant for some time. In that case, there are a few matters of housekeeping you should be aware of. As you may have noticed when you viewed the property, the house is quite the old gal. Her 3 stories stand tall and formidable in the dense forest surrounding it. Though the trees tower over her, she will not be cowed. The roof has held up better than we ever expected with so many trees around. It was replaced in 2018, another urging of my oldest daughter, though it had only a few cosmetic issues at the time. The trees closest to the home are sturdy and hardly ever dare to drop their branches directly on the roof. By the time you move in, it may be time for a fresh coat of paint, though I found the house does prefer to be a light blue with white trim. She likes to stand out amongst the darkness of the forest. I'll never forget the way the old gal gleamed at Christmas time, with string lights shining bright enough to light up the snow all around. Oh, I do hope you have the most wondrous Christmases there. Anyway, I've gotten off track. Yes, the house will require a new coat of paint, and I'm sure you will decorate the inside as you see fit. Before you start to move too much around, be aware that some of the items in the house have been strategically placed. For you to fully understand what a treasure you have just purchased, I feel it is pertinent for me to tell you a little story. My Reginald and I purchased the home fully furnished before any of our children were brought into this world. The first year we lived there was pure bliss. Young and in love, we dedicated almost all of our time to each other. My husband fondly referred to this time as our honeymoon phase. One of our favorite activities was exploring the vast property surrounding us. When the weather did not permit roaming, we explored the home itself, though from the outside it appears as any manor in the woods would. Inside is much to be discovered. During that first year, we enjoyed the convenience of it being fully furnished and move-in ready. But over time, I yearned to decorate, to make the space my own. Reginald, ever the obedient husband, humored me. We started by taking down every painting that hung on the walls, deciding which to keep, which to sell away, and which to simply move to a different area. That is when the first odd discovery was made. Behind a great many of the paintings, there were holes, right in the plaster walls. Some appeared to be methodically cut in perfect squares. Others, as though a fist was punched straight through it. We, of course, decided that those would eventually be covered back up. I piled the painting up in the drawing room and set about cleaning the walls. By the end of the day, I had yet to decide on what exactly to do with them. So I let them lie and went to bed. In the morning, however, they were all hung perfectly back in their spots, as if all my work had never happened. For days, I assumed Reginald had done it, and he assumed I had. We ultimately didn't speak of it until it was too late. When my Reginald started back to work as supervisor of the factory in town, I resumed my endeavor to make the home feel like it was mine. I hated the big rugs scattered all around the place. I've always preferred a nice hardwood floor. No need for carpets that hold all the dirt and hair that's dragged in. The furniture was easy enough to move out of my way, and the rugs all rolled up nicely. I was mighty proud of my hard work until I got a good look at the wood. Large, dark, discolored splotches marred what should have been beautiful hardwood hiding under those ghastly rugs, which I'm sure you've seen. Unfortunately, much like the paintings, the rugs remained. I'd go into more detail, but some of the full truths have been lost to time. But I will tell you, be careful what you look behind or under. Though the house allowed me to dust and paint and add decor as my heart desired, it did not allow me to leave any of its secret spots uncovered. Behind dressers, cabinets, doors, paintings, mirrors, and under couches, chairs, and beds, the house hides. After the first year, I gave up trying to rearrange and became content with adding a few of my own touches here and there. I think that once the house realized I'd stopped trying to change it so much, it settled down. For a while at least, we entered a time of peace again. But the monotony of loneliness began to get to me. Thankfully, we soon welcomed our oldest daughter. As soon as she arrived, the house awoke with laughter and joy. All hours of the night, she would giggle, and the house seemed to echo with it, those echoes long lingering even after she fell asleep. As we welcomed more children, it seemed that no matter how much we tied, the house remained scattered with toys. It was as if I'd turn my back and they'd all jump right off the shelf and resume their places on the floor. The never-ending chore of putting away made me weary to my bones. In a stroke of wisdom, my Reginald decided one summer to send the children to my mother's for a week. She lived on the coast, never one for the colder air where we chose to live. We didn't see her often, and the children did love her so. Off they went without a complaint, leaving my love and I alone for the first time in over a decade. We didn't know what to do with ourselves. That first night, it was as if we were newlyweds again. But I won't traumatize you with any of that. We felt so young again, only waking when the sun finally shone through our bedroom window, with no rush to feed the masses. When we finally emerged from our bed a little after noon, we walked into an unexpected scene. Every toy, book, pen, shoe, and piece of sports equipment that belonged to the children had been strewn about the first floor in the most uncivilized manner. There was no question that the house had been perfectly clean the night before. Our first thought was that we'd been burgled, that someone had broken in, thinking we'd all left for the coast. The only problem is, we told no one the children were leaving, and we had no neighbors to have noticed their departure. Regardless, we checked for signs of forced entry on all the doors and windows. Finding nothing, we were forced to believe it was whatever force we had once felt in our home, agitated with us once more. As you've probably ascertained, the house is very particular. We had come to accept not being able to move the furniture or pictures, but were only just realizing that the house did not like many of the new things we'd brought in either. How many times had I picked certain toys up off the floor, only to find them there again in the morning? How many times had I unfairly blamed the children for messes they claimed they knew nothing about. That morning, we saw the truth of the matter, and I knew something had to change. The children didn't deserve my anger or anxiety. They were not to blame. When they returned, I was sure to tell them as much. But before then, we had to find a way to coexist again with the forces in the house. What should have been a week of relaxation and reconnecting became a week of trial and error. On the first day, we tidied the house, putting everything back where we thought everything should go. Each room made perfect. Then we waited for the first item to fall out of place. As if the house was testing us, it took hours for anything to happen that first day. Then it started, slowly at first, giving us time to notice the items that were out of place, time to correct. It seemed to go in order of the things that bothered it the most, or maybe just the longest. The first toy to go was a set of bells we'd gotten when our oldest was small. The set was a popular toy amongst all our babies, with our youngest being nearly 8 at the time. These bells hadn't truly rung joyously through the house in years, yet they always made their way off the shelf onto the rug. Our family's peace was more important than any sentimentality, or at least that's what my husband and I agreed. And into the bin they went. Quickly, we noticed patterns. Toys that made too much noise. Shoes that left scuffs on the floor. Sports equipment that may or may not have been involved in a few broken windows and busted light bulbs. Books that sat too heavy on the overburdened bookshelves. Room by room we went, removing any and all items the house found to be offensive. It was by no means an easy undertaking. So many items had many more years of use left in them. But knowing what I knew, I could no longer sacrifice my sanity for a few boxes full of possessions. When the last box of offending items left the property, it was as if the house itself took a deep, calming breath. I hadn't quite realized just how stressed I'd been feeling until I didn't feel it anymore. Weight I'd grown accustomed to bearing eased off my shoulders. The air was lighter, the lights were brighter, and the house even seemed to smell better. Not that there was a noticeable bad smell before. Everything just felt better. That night, Reginald and I slept deeply for the first time in years, waking refreshed and ready for anything. I was ready for my children to come home. This week had been the longest we'd been apart since the youngest was born. I'd spent 2 weeks in the hospital that time, but that's neither here nor there. We had 2 more days before my mother would return them to us, sun-kissed and spoiled rotten in the best way. In those 2 days, I made time to sit quietly and listen to the house the way I used to when it was just Reginald and myself. Familiar creaks and groans greeted my ears. My senses were filled with the house. The smell of wood, water, earth, detergents, fabric, food, all seemed to swirl around me. For a long while, it was all just the normal feelings of home, of any home. Every house I'd ever lived in had the same smells and sounds. I assume every house in the whole world has the same base set of smells, sounds, and lights. I knew there was something past that, though, here. So I waited. A few months back, I'd read a book on meditation, hoping to help lift some of the stress I'd been buried under. While I waited, I took a few quests from my readings. I methodically relaxed each muscle, starting at my toes and working my way to my head. I felt each breath as it traveled in and out of my lungs. I tried to tune my ears inward to listen to the beating of my heart, attempting to hear the blood rushing through my veins. That's when I finally heard the breathing. It wasn't my own. It was offbeat of mine. Reginald wasn't home. We had no pets, but the slow, deep, steady breaths were just a whisper in my ear. I focused with all my might on the sound, hoping to pinpoint the direction it was coming from. Realization dawned on me. I was all around me, as if I was inside a lung. Then, a heartbeat, slower than my own, reverberated around me. Slowly, I opened my eyes. What I saw changed everything. Ever so lightly, the walls billowed in and out. Ever so slightly, the chandelier above my head rhythmically bobbed, as if contracting, thrumming. Everything in the central family room moved in a steady beat. How many days had we spent in this room? The majority of our lives circulated in this room, where we were most often all together as a family, the way a family room should be used. We often joked that this room was the heart of the house, because there was always so much love here. We were not wrong. This room truly holds the heart of the home. You may think I'm crazy, but I am telling you, here and now, the house is alive. It is not haunted. There are no goblins or ghouls. The house itself is a living, breathing being, a being that I have cared for, just as it has cared for me, for more years than I care to count. You see, my daughter never believed. She did not understand. When I finally agreed that I was too old to care for the house on my own, it was because the house told me so. Not her. I was growing too old to care for it, and in turn, it could no longer care for me. It needs someone younger, someone to breathe new life into it again. And if you care for it, it will care for you. When tended to properly, it will multiply your life and give you more than you can ever imagine. I do hope Carmen found the right person to take on the challenge. I pray the house does not miss us too terribly much. If you follow the rules, then it should grow to love you, too, I'm sure. With love, Cynthia. Rule 1. Don't move the furniture. Rule 2. Don't leave any holes uncovered. Rule 3. Don't make changes. Only fix things that break. Rule 4. Don't put anything on the mantel in the bedroom. Rule 5. Never throw balls inside. Rule 6. Never scream at your partner inside. On the grounds is fine. Rule 7. Always walk gently. Rule 8. Always lock the doors. Rule 9. Always listen to the house. Take care of it, and it will take care of you. I have lived in the house for a week now. What I thought to be the ramblings of a crazy old woman who wanted nothing more than to stay with her home have quickly become undeniable truths. On my second night, the house welcomed me in a way only it could have. I'm not sure if this makes me just as crazy as her, but I've vowed to care for this home as long as it cares for me. We're off to a great start. Lucien in the sky with diamonds. I really should have realized how vindictive Heather could be. What is that saying? Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. When she found out I was seeing someone else and had traded her in for the other woman, a younger, prettier model, I just know that it was that very moment that she decided to exact her revenge. Unfortunately, Heather knows all of my secrets, including the biggest one of all, the fact that I am a world-renowned jewel thief who has recently completed one of the largest heists of the century, the theft of the Weatherby diamonds. Yes, I stole the necklace quite smoothly and easily from its display case at the art museum. I won't go into all of the meticulous details of how I managed to pull off the job. Let's just say that I know exactly what I'm doing, and I plan everything to the nth degree. All of my operations normally run like a well-oiled machine. That is, if no one interferes with my flow. But no, Heather just had to throw a monkey wrench into my work. I have to take ownership of it, however. It was entirely my own fault. I got careless for a brief moment and let my guard down. One night when I was feeling quite loose and relaxed, admittedly, I had also drunk too much wine. I had bragged to her of my prowess as a jewel thief. I probably also promised her the moon and stars at the time. Later, of course, when I dumped her, she used that information to cook my goose. I just know that she squealed on me and is responsible for my current predicament. I am now on an Air France flight, ready to depart to my native Paris, sweating like a pig because I'm afraid that I've been spotted by the cops. I just know that it's Heather who told. Why else would I be targeted this way? I have always been one to remain incognito, to fly under the radar, so to speak. Thus, the only logical conclusion I can arrive at is that she is the one who turned me in. Now the cops are surely out to get me. They are at this very moment rapidly approaching my seat. The Weatherby diamonds are set with precision into a choker valued at several $million. A choker that I am now wearing as I sit here prepared for takeoff. The necklace is currently living up to its name. It is choking me under a somewhat baggy black turtleneck. I despise turtlenecks, hate the way they press up against your neck. I opted for the loosest turtleneck possible, but it still presses up uncomfortably against my neck. The combination of the choker necklace and the turtleneck are almost more than I can bear. I wear the turtleneck under an equally baggy hoodie so no one can spot the necklace. Normally, I prefer my clothes to conform to my trim body like a glove. My sartorial senses are offended by this sloppy but choking attire. Who would ever wear a turtleneck with a hoodie? Unfortunately, I really have no choice. My outfit was not chosen for fashion. It does, however, allow me to sail through airport security without being stopped. The plan is, once I land in Paris, I will meet with a high-end jewelry broker who will give me top dollar for the jewels. I will be for life. That is, if I get away with it. I am afraid that the police are right now, at this very moment, making their way to the back of the plane where I am sitting. My seat on the jumbo jet, like my clothes, has also been carefully selected. I am in the second to last row and am seated on the aisle. I chose this seat so that I can make a quick exit to the restroom if needed and dump the jewels somewhere in the tiny closet of the restroom. We haven't taken off yet, and the flight attendant has just made the standard announcement about how we need to remain seated with our seat belts on and our trays in the upright position. Right after she says that, I spot the blue uniformed policeman making his way back towards me. With no time to waste, I disregard the stewardess's explicit directions and quickly shove my tray to the upright position. I then dash inside the tiny cubicle of a restroom before anyone can stop me. I shut the door firmly and pull the lever to lock the door. I really need to find a hiding spot for the necklace. I can't afford to be caught with it. I don't want to flush it down the toilet. I would be, in effect, flushing all of my hopes and dreams away. Instead, I need to stash the necklace somewhere so I can somehow later retrieve it. I quickly pull my hoodie off, followed by my turtleneck. With fumbling fingers, I fiddle with the silver clasp until the necklace falls off into my hands. Next, I carefully place the necklace in the paper towel dispenser behind the wad of folded paper towels. As I do this, my heart racing, I hear a sharp knock on the plasticine door that folds in like an accordion. "Monsieur?" the flight attendant inquires. She swiftly changes to English, but speaks with a strong French accent. The plane is ready for takeoff. We need you to return to your seat now and put your seatbelt on, please, she says in a firm but polite voice. Pardon, mademoiselle. I really need to use the facilities. I will be out directly. I run the water in the sink to make my act convincing and hurriedly wipe my hands with just one paper towel, taking care not to use too many so that the necklace remains hidden in the dispenser. I drop the used paper towel in the wastebasket and then don my turtleneck and hoodie once again. With 2 layers on in the tiny, airless washroom, I am now sweating more than ever. No matter, I tell myself, taking a deep breath in an effort to remain cool. At least, I am no longer choking. My throat feels slightly better, although the turtleneck still irritates me. I quickly push open the door and return to my aisle seat, where I dutifully pull my seatbelt across my lap and try to appear cool and collected. The policeman approaches me, his shiny badge glinting in the morning sun streaming through the small windows. Mr. Martin? He pronounces Martin in the American way, rather than the way I prefer it. Martine. My passport says I am Lucien Martin, although it is not my real name. My passport, which is fake, says I am a French citizen. When in America, however, I have a California driver's license that proclaims me to be Luke Martin. I have deliberately chosen a name that is very common, both in French and English. In every aspect of my life, I need to blend in and remain unmemorable. Yes, I answer politely. Please stand up. We need to do a pat search on you. Pat search? I repeat indignantly. What are you looking for? I am not at liberty to say. But with the Patriot Act, we have the right to search any and all air passengers at will. The cop says firmly. Patriot Act? Do you think I am a terrorist? I say this quite loudly. I hear a collective gasp from my fellow passengers, who are understandably alarmed, hearing nothing other than the word terrorist. I sincerely hope not, sir, the cop said smoothly. Just doing my job. I let out a tremendous sigh. Go ahead. Do your job. Pat away. The cop uses bladed hands to do a thorough pat search, running his hands smoothly up and down my sides. He searches my pant pockets and instructs me to remove my hoodie. I do so, laughing inside. I didn't want to wear the hoodie anyways. After several long minutes, the cop finally stops his fruitless search, finding nothing. Okay, sir, he says finally. You have been cleared. He walks to the front of the plane, where he presumably has to talk to the captain. This plane is cleared for takeoff, he announces to the male attendant standing at the front of the plane. As he does that, I glance towards the back of the plane to see the reaction from the other flight attendant, the lady who had tried to shoo me out of the washroom. To my surprise, she quickly enters the washroom and pulls the door firmly shut behind her. My heart sinks. My plan had been to quickly visit the head once again and retrieve the jewels before anyone else entered. I haven't seen anyone else, apart from the stewardess, use the restroom. I have been carefully watching, in between dealing with the nosy policeman. Now, I pray it isn't too late. Several long moments pass, and the flight attendant finally exits the restroom. I quickly unbuckle my seatbelt and hurry back there. I frantically pull the door shut behind me and shove my hand into the narrow slot of the paper towel dispenser. I feel around with my fingers, my heart sinking. The necklace is gone. With shaking hands and fury coursing through my veins, I return to my seat. As I do so, I catch sight of the petite, blonde flight attendant who had entered the washroom before me. She gives me a Mona Lisa smile and tells me once again that I need to buckle my seatbelt and prepare for takeoff. I smile back and raise my eyebrows at her flirtatiously. "Certainly, mademoiselle. I'll buckle up right away. I can hardly wait to get to Paris." "But of course," she responds in her charming French accent. "Paris is the city of light." I vow to myself that once I reach Paris, I will tail the flight attendant and somehow try to overpower her, either by brute force or with my relentless charm. A gentleman jewel thief's job is never done, I tell myself. I need to retrieve the diamonds at all costs. They are my ticket to the good life. The plane's engine roars as if feels my strong determination. The giant silver bird speeds down the runway and triumphantly takes to the sky. At last, the blonde flight attendant moves down the plane's narrow aisle. She turns her head back towards me at the last moment and smiles mischievously. Mona Lisa no longer. "I hope you enjoy your flight, monsieur. Bon voyage." Falling to conclusions. Fear can make you do crazy things. Cry, laugh, scream, even kill. At this precise moment, it is causing a man named Joe to run for his life. It is also causing 7 members of an unknown faction to chase him. Joe doesn't know where he is going, only that he has to get away. His chest pulses in and out as his body tries to drag in air to compensate for all the running. His legs ache as he pushes them to go faster. A voice in his head urges him on. "We need to go faster." "Shut up. You think I don't know that? It's your fault we're running in the first place." "Gosh, a guy can't have a little fun. You killed those guys." "Correction, you killed those guys. As far as anyone else knows, I am just a figment of your imagination. Besides, now you can be certain that the men who killed your family have been punished for their actions. I didn't need your help. The police would have handled it. Now these guys are chasing us. Less complaining, more running." Joe continues sprinting through the autumn-colored trees, looking for an escape. As he taps into his second wind, he sees sunlight beaming down ahead. He gets to a bright clearing, a good distance ahead of his pursuers. The beginnings of a sigh of relief melt into a sigh of despair. On the other side of the very narrow leaf-filled clearing is a very wide, rock-filled gorge. He skids to the edge, kicking a few dozen leaves over the edge. Gasping for air, with his hands on his knees, he watches as the leaves slowly pinwheel out of sight. A good 1,000-foot drop followed by slopes of jagged rock. I'll definitely feel that in the morning. We could make it. Shut up. No, we can't. I could make it. Well, I can't. He takes a step back and puts his hands behind his back as he tries to catch his breath. As he turns around, a single man wearing green, brown, and black fatigues skids into the clearing. He sees Joe and raises his assault rifle. The gun trembles slightly as the soldier trains it on him. Joe watches as the nervous soldier's finger tightens slightly on the trigger. A single bead of sweat slides down the soldier's forehead as he begins to talk. We're gonna need you to come with us. I'm afraid I can't do that. That's right. Tell him we aren't going anywhere with him. Puh, please, we're not gonna hurt you. I find that hard to believe. If I remember correctly, you guys were shooting at me not too long ago. Come on, there's only one of him. We can take him. We just want to talk to you. Do some tests, ask some questions. What if you don't like what you hear? What if your tests and your questions don't get you the answers that you want? What then? Huh? Why haven't we killed him yet? Would you shut up already? Who are you talking to? Nobody, okay. I think I'll decline. Wow, I didn't think you had it in ya. That is not an option! A different voice booms from within the trees. The rest of the group bursts into the clearing, all wearing matching fatigues. Their assault rifles are all trained on him. Just answer me one question. Why do you have to be able to explain everything? Why do you have to know how everything works? Joe yells, with tears of anger welling up in his eyes. Are you crying? What a baby. How about less crying and more killing? If it isn't normal, let's chase it down and shoot at it with automatic weapons and force it to cooperate. Find out how it works by any means necessary. You people disgust me. If you don't kill them soon, I will. Would you shut up already, sir? I don't know who you are talking to, but we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. Well, as my mother always said, if it's not hard, then it is not worth doing. Whoa, what are you doing? They are looking for a reason to kill us. If they kill me, you die too. As Joe says this, he slowly takes his hands from behind his back. A 40-inch, sleek, razor-sharp, black katana is held firmly in each hand. As they see the blades, their fingers squeeze the triggers. Volleys of bullets fly towards Joe, each trying to reach the target first. His swords move lightning fast as he takes into account where on his body they are aiming and tries to deflect as many bullets as possible. Despite his efforts, he's breathing through a couple new holes by the time they need to reload. They watch anxiously as Joe stumbles forward. The sword in his left hand sticks into the ground and keeps him from falling all the way to the ground. He leans heavily on the sword as ragged, shallow breaths tear out of him. Dark red blood stains his shirt and pants in various places. He sways, but manages to stand, leaving the sword embedded in the ground. He tries to look at them, but the 7 soldiers double into 14. He shakes his head and tries again, but the 14 soldiers are now swimming in front of his vision. He settles on focusing on the group as a whole, seeing the forest, not the trees. Did I pass the test? Oh well. My answer is still no. If you want my body, you'll have to fetch it. Joe slurs. You are seriously losing it. You are going to get us killed. No, don't! Joe spreads his arms and falls backwards off of the cliff. The soldiers dash to the edge and see him falling. He watches as the edge of the cliff and their faces shrink away from him. The wind whips his clothes wildly as it accelerates past him. He closes his eyes, slows his breathing, and concentrates. Suddenly, the sound of the wind slows and then stops. He opens his eyes and sees that he is now floating in mid-air. A faint glow and a quiet hum emanates from his left hand. He looks down and sees that about 5 feet under him is one particularly sharp shard of black rock that would have ended up right through his chest. He also notices that his vision has blacked out on the edge. Something was wrong. What did you do? I took over. It's obvious that you were on a suicide mission with that little stunt you pulled. I did too much work to get this body to just let you destroy us like this. He contemplates his grisly death for a second before reorienting himself. Using the power from his hands, he zooms back up towards the cliff edge. His head pops up over the ridge as the 7 soldiers are leaving the clearing. They walk slowly and lackadaisically back into the trees in a single file line. Apparently, his guaranteed death is good enough for them. His anger intensifies with this nonchalant disregard for him as a person. The fact that they don't really care about retrieving the body pisses him off. They even left his sword exactly where it got stuck in the ground. The nails on his right hand dig into his palm as his grip tightens on the sword. The angry look on his face morphs into a grin. He is going to enjoy what is about to happen. He floats back onto the cliff and lands silently on the ground. He quietly picks up his second sword and zips to the soldier, bringing up the rear. In one swift moment, he puts one sword through his back and uses the second sword to separate his head from his body. The head spins wildly as it tumbles into a nearby pile of leaves. He pushes the soldier's body out of the way and heads towards the second soldier. The second soldier gets cut down in one stroke, starting from his right shoulder and ending at his left hip. As the top half of the body slides away diagonally from the bottom half, Joe sees that the other soldiers have become aware of his presence. Their eyes widen and their mouths hang open as they realize the man that they thought was dead is still very much alive. Joe uses the moment of hesitation to close in. The third soldier is split vertically in half as Joe brings the sword right up through the middle of him, splitting him in half like a deli sandwich. He steps through the space the third soldier's body once occupied and heads toward the fourth soldier. He rams both swords into the soldier's abdomen and sees the soldier's eyes widen with pain. He pulls both swords in opposite directions, shredding the soldier's midsection. He lifts his foot and kicks the soldier, sending his body to the ground with a thump. 4 down, 3 to go. The remaining 3 soldiers spread out and raise their assault rifles. Not this time, Joe snarls at them. Not like this. It was never supposed to be like this. He spins the swords one time in his hands as he steps over the fourth soldier's quickly cooling body. Raising the swords in his hands, he throws them at the 2 outside soldiers. Both soldiers are struck between the eyes before they even get off a shot. The force of the swords knock them both backwards. One of the swords plunges into the ground, propping the 5th soldier's body up at a 15-degree angle. Gravity slowly pulls the body down the blood-soaked blade. The other blade pins the 6th soldier head first to the gnarled trunk of a nearby tree. This time, gravity works quicker and splits his skull as his body slumps to the ground. Joe, now weaponless, bravely strides toward the last soldier. As the final soldier goes to shoot, Joe grabs the end of his gun and quickly shoves it up. The single shot the soldier gets off intertwines with the painful crunch of bones as the gun sight collides with his nose. The shot flies harmlessly into the air above their heads. The final soldier stumbles backwards, struggling to pull air through his bloodied nostrils. The strap attached to the rifle, still in Joe's hand, keeps him from falling. Joe pulls the barrel of the gun down a couple of inches and jams it under the soldier's chin. The soldier is still dazed from his new breathing impairment and doesn't even realize what is happening. The automatic fire perforating his brain quickly takes care of his need to breathe. Joe's grin widens into a smile as he looks at his work. They were right to fear me, Joe thinks to himself. Not like this. He prepares to go retrieve his swords when a mysterious pain stops him in his tracks. His head feels like it is about to split open. He slams his eyes shut, trying to not pass out. When he reopens his eyes, all he can see is a bright orange light. He blinks a couple times and realizes that he is on his back, staring up at the setting sun. He looks down and sees a sharp, blood-stained rock protruding from his stomach, looking like a blood volcano just sprouted out of his chest. His mind struggles to come to terms with what has just happened, but his eviscerated midsection makes it hard. He tries to speak, but all that comes out of his mouth is a splatter of blood. It was all in his mind. No miraculous survival, no sweet revenge, no daring escape. Just a terrified man sprawled, broken and bloodied, at the bottom of a rocky gorge. He lived his life in fear, and it was this fear that eventually drove him to his death. At least the voice in his head is finally quiet. His gasping breaths slow, as the last thing he sees is the sun slipping beneath the horizon. Fear can make you do crazy things. Cry, laugh, scream, even kill. Right about now, it was the last thought that crossed Joe's mind as his brain seeped out of his shattered skull. Echoes in the dark. Michelle Byers woke to the hum of the oxygen machine and the sterile white glow of hospital lights. She had survived the crash. Her husband, Daniel, had not. They told her she had been unconscious for days, and in those days, the world had stolen her sense of normalcy. Recovery was grueling. Her body ached, but her mind suffered more. The doctors diagnosed her with narcolepsy, an after effect of the trauma. She struggled to distinguish wakefulness from the strange visions that plagued her, but nothing prepared her for what came next. Chapter 1. Fractured Pieces. The house felt empty without Daniel. Michelle moved through the rooms like a ghost herself, touching the furniture, the framed photographs, the tiny details of a life that had once been whole. Every object felt sacred, preserved in time, but also hollow without him. Then the strange things began happening. The first time, she thought she was imagining it. She walked into the kitchen one morning to find Daniel's favorite coffee mug on the counter. It wasn't just there. It was filled exactly as he would have made it. 3 sugars, 2 splashes of cream. She froze. Her breath came in quick, shallow bursts. She reached out with a trembling hand and touched the ceramic. It was warm. Did I do this? She whispered to herself. She had no recollection of making the coffee. She dumped it in the sink, trying to push away the nagging thought clawing at the back of her mind. That night, she checked Daniel's drawer, the one where she had placed his watch, his wedding ring, his last belongings. The watch was gone. She searched frantically. Through the drawers, through the entire bedroom, the nightstand, the closet. Nothing. Lack of sleep, she muttered. That's all this is. But then the voicemails started. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Past. One evening, as she walked into the living room, the red light on the answering machine blinked. It was an old relic, something Daniel had insisted on keeping despite her protests about just using their cell phones. She pressed play. Hey, love. Just letting you know I'll be home late. Don't wait up. Her breath hitched. His voice, crisp and casual, like it always had been. Like he wasn't dead. Her legs buckled, and she collapsed onto the couch, pressing her hands to her mouth. She checked the timestamp. The message had been left yesterday. She deleted it. An error it had to be, but it happened again and again, every few nights. The same message, with slightly different wording. Sometimes it was just a simple, love you, see you soon. She played one for her friend Angela. Angela's face paled. This is some sick joke. I swear, I'm not making this up. Angela reached for her hand. Michelle, this isn't healthy. Maybe it's your condition. Your doctor said hallucinations are possible with narcolepsy. Michelle recoiled. You think I'm imagining this? Angela hesitated. I think grief can do strange things. And you haven't been sleeping. Michelle didn't argue. What was there to say? She made an appointment with her doctor, who prescribed sleeping pills to help regulate her sleep cycles. Chapter 3. The Stranger in the Coffee Shop. For weeks, the house was quiet. No misplaced objects, no strange messages. It was almost as if, by sleeping more, she had sealed whatever crack had let the past bleed into the present. Then she saw him. She was at a small cafe downtown, sipping on chamomile tea, staring blankly at her phone. It was an overcast afternoon, a steady drizzle coating the streets outside in shimmering gray. The bell over the door jingled, and a figure stepped inside. Her breath stopped in her throat. Daniel, sitting at a table near the window, laughing, his eyes crinkling in that way they always had. A woman sat across from him, stirring her coffee. Michelle's heart pounded as she stood, nearly knocking over her cup. She stumbled toward the door, her vision tunneling. Outside, the streets were a mess of honking cars, sloshing tires, and blurred figures. She tried to cross, barely noticing the screech of brakes and a driver shouting at her as she nearly stepped in front of a cab. By the time she made it to the other side, Daniel was gone. She pressed her hands to the cafe window, her breath fogging up the glass. No, 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 no. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone and called Angela. He's alive, she gasped. Angela, I swear to God, I just saw him. Angela's voice was strained. Michelle, that's impossible. I saw him, she screamed, drawing the attention of pedestrians. She turned, scanning the street wildly. No sign of him. Chapter 4. The Cracks in Reality. When she got home, The silence of the house felt like it was pressing down on her. She sat on the couch, her hands gripping her knees. Had she really seen Daniel? Was she losing her grip on reality? As exhaustion pulled at her, she drifted into a restless sleep. And then a sound, footsteps, familiar, slow. Moving toward the bedroom, her heart pounded as she forced herself up. The house was dark, the air thick with something unspoken. She crept toward the bedroom, every step feeling heavier than the last. She pushed open the door. Nothing. Her breath came in ragged gobs. She turned on the light. The room was empty. Just her mind playing tricks again. She sat on the bed, tears burning her eyes. What's happening to me? Then her phone rang. She snatched it up, hands shaking. Mom? Honey? Her mother's voice was soft. I just wanted to check on you. I'm not okay, Michelle whispered. Mom, I saw him. I saw Daniel. Her mother hesitated. Michelle, you know we talked about this before. You and Daniel discussed his wishes in case something happened. You don't remember? A cold wave washed over her. No, we never had that conversation. Her mother sighed. And what about your trip to the lake house last summer? The one he planned? The words stuck in her throat. That never happened. Did it? Then she noticed something else. Her hands, they were different. The faint scar from childhood, gone. The calluses from her years of playing piano, missing. Her reflection in the bedroom mirror flickered for a second. An almost imperceptible glitch, as though the pixels themselves struggled to keep her image in place. Then the bedroom door creaked open. Footsteps, familiar, a shadow in the doorway. Michelle, the voice whispered. Her pulse stilled. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned and saw herself standing there, watching. The world cracked apart. Darkness swallowed her whole. When Michelle awoke, the room looked the same, but wrong. The pictures on the wall were slightly different. Her wedding photo with Daniel now showed them standing in front of a place they had never been. The color of the curtains had changed. Her phone no longer recognized her face. She stumbled to the bathroom, flicked on the light, and gasped. The reflection stared back with blank eyes. Her face, similar, yet unfamiliar. Sharper jaw, eyes a shade too light, skin too smooth. The scar on her collarbone from the skiing accident years ago was gone. A mechanical voice echoed faintly from her phone behind her. System error, biometric mismatch. Please verify user identity. She backed away from the mirror, from the glass that shimmered like liquid for half a second, as if the world was re-rendering itself in real time. She opened drawers, desperate for something familiar, something hers. But the clothes weren't hers. The books on her shelf bore her name as the author, only she'd never written them. The covers depicted surreal scenes, cities made of bone, people with stitched smiles, hollow-eyed children staring up at crimson moons. She ran outside. The street was there, but so quiet. The sky above was bruised purple, the clouds tinged with red. No birds, no wind. Every person she passed moved too slowly, their limbs jerky, robotic. They didn't blink, didn't speak, didn't see her. Michelle walked in a daze, her breath fogging in the warm air. The newsstand still had papers, but the headlines made her stomach twist. Temporal leak worsens. Memory replacements imminent. Global consciousness sync delayed. Users report phantom lives. Version control glitch detected. Subject 487. M. Byers. Flagged for recalibration. Subject: she turned to flee, but froze when she saw the cafe. The same cafe where she'd seen Daniel weeks ago. And there he was again, laughing, alive. Wrong. Sitting across from someone with her face. The other, Michelle, turned, and their eyes met. The world paused. A buzzing started low in her ears, rising to a high-pitched shriek. The people froze mid-step. The air shimmered. The other Michelle stood slowly and began to walk toward her. Michelle backed up, stumbling into a metal pole. A nearby screen flickered to life, displaying the symbol of an eye with fractals radiating outward. Then, a voice spoke from nowhere and everywhere. Welcome, Subject 487. Consciousness sync complete. Version displacement detected. Initiating purge. Michelle screamed, but there was no sound, only light. And then oblivion. Epilogue. Static. In a bright white room with no doors, Michelle sits at a desk. Her hands type furiously on a keyboard that glows with symbols she doesn't recognize. On the wall, a screen shows surveillance feeds. Dozens of herselves navigating fractured realities. Some crying, some lost, some laughing beside Daniel. A door finally opens behind her. A figure enters. It's her again. This time, dressed in clinical white, clipboard in hand. Her eyes are cold, unblinking. Reset failed. Clipboard Michelle says. They always fight it. Desk Michelle whispers. They remember too much. Clipboard. Michelle tilts her head. Try a deeper extraction next time. Desk. Michelle nods, tears streaking down her face. Which one is the real me? The clipboard falls to the floor. No answer. The light flickers. The room glitches. And somewhere, in another version of reality, a woman named Michelle Byers wakes up again. To the hum of an oxygen machine and the sterile white glow of hospital lights. Was it all a dream, or was this the dream? She doesn't know anymore, and maybe she never did. The couple in the glass. The first time she saw them, she didn't think too much of it. Just an exceptionally attractive, well-dressed couple having dinner together in their multi-million-dollar penthouse while overlooking downtown Chicago. Bev Thomas watched them from the balcony of the apartment, hidden away in the shadows of the night, wondering what it must be like. The apartment she was currently cleaning for work was cherry enough, but nothing compared to the place these two lived in. She'd studied them, admired them, became invested in them, but never once did it occur to her during that first sighting that anything was wrong. The woman wasn't just beautiful, she was elegant. Elegant in the way that women just weren't anymore. Audrey Hepburn, Grace Kelly, Jackie Kennedy, women who embodied class, charm, and fashion. The woman in the window looked as though she belonged on that same list, regardless of the fact that she was completely unknown to Bev. She wasn't a celebrity, wasn't an actress or a singer, and Bev didn't recognize her from the world of politics. She was just a stunning, refined, angelic individual who looked as though she'd descended from heaven itself to grace the earth with her beauty. She wore a ball gown of sorts, pale yellow, and doused in what Bev could only imagine were real diamonds from the way the material shimmered. Bev couldn't help but allow the jealousy to set in. How could one person have it all? If her looks weren't enough, there was the man seated across from her. He was unrealistically handsome. She was convinced he'd had work done to make him look that way, like he'd just arrived from a factory somewhere. But inside, she doubted it. Something about his face told her it was all natural. He landed somewhere between Paul Newman and Henry Cavill. From the Newman side came the piercing blue eyes, so deep in color that Bev could see them clearly from the balcony across the boulevard. The stubble of a full beard gave him the timeless, rugged quality. But then came the Cavill features. A strong, chiseled jaw, a full head of wavy auburn hair, and a physique that looked as though Michelangelo had risen from the dead and carved it himself. Bev's life could have stayed perfectly normal if it had only been that one time, but it hadn't. She cleaned that apartment 5 nights a week for an owner that was in town once a year, and every single night she found them in that exact same spot, just looking at each other. The second time, she found herself talking out loud about it. After all, it was just her. The walls weren't going to be critical of her self-monologue. The hell are they doing? Every night? She whined as she dusted away at the shelving and priceless decor. If I had money like that, I'd never cook another thing ever again. Then it occurred to her, and she nodded to herself at the realization. Probably a personal chef brings the 5-star menu to their front door. Unbelievable. She watched them as they ate, trying to imagine what the steak and asparagus tasted like when you were that well off. But from what she could tell, they didn't seem to enjoy it all that much. Probably eat like royalty so much that the glamour wore off, she'd thought. She'd forced herself to ignore them after that for the entirety of the second night. It was when she arrived for her shift on the third evening that the situation started to feel off. Something just wasn't quite right about them. Third night in a row, and there they were, seating by the window, candlelit dinner and champagne. It was like watching someone's anniversary on a loop. That night, she didn't ignore them. That night, she actually moved a chair from the other side of the living room to the window where she could make herself comfortable as she stalked. She began to realize small details about them. Their clothing had changed, but their expressions were exactly the same. Stoic. As she watched their rendezvous unfold, she noticed that neither of them took a single bite of their meals or a solitary sip of their wine. Odd. Then there was Prince Charming's facial hair. The stubble had been there to begin with, but now the shadow of a budding neck beard was now showing. He hadn't shaved in a few days. It wasn't all that peculiar, but something about the couple told Bev that these weren't the kind of people who let hygiene go unattended. It was like the thing in the photo, not like the others. As she studied their faces, she noticed that they both looked exhausted, like they hadn't slept much. The final observation she made was that they never moved from those seats. When they did shift in place or push food around on their plates, their movements were subtle, almost careful. It became almost irritating for Bev. At first, she'd enjoyed daydreaming about what their world must be like, but now the show was becoming a bore. She moved the chair back to its spot on the other side of the room and ignored them as best she could for the rest of her shift. But when she returned for the fourth and fifth night that week, she found them there still, staring at each other and never moving. Saturday and Sunday she had off, but her mind was completely occupied by that couple across the way. It bothered Bev so much that Monday morning she decided to do a little detective work. She didn't have names to go on, so she went about finding them out. She made calls, did some internet searches, even sorted through city and county records to get any information that she could. It took her most of the day, but she finally found something. The penthouse on the 42nd floor on the left-hand wing belonged to a man named Doug Allen. He was some sort of financial wizard and had obtained an enormous amount of wealth day trading. From what Bev could tell, he'd never been married. Must be a girlfriend, she thought. But then she called the front desk of the building the penthouse was in and discovered that Mr. Allen hadn't used his personal entry sensor or code in over a month. When she went in to clean the apartment that night, they were there again, sitting by the window, looking like a set of puppets. It was too much for Bev. She was too invested. she made her way across to their building and waited outside until a stranger walked in, walking in behind them and onto the elevator as if she belonged. Thankfully, the ladies at reception were fully engaged in a conversation about the latest episode of Yellowstone and hadn't noticed. When she arrived on the 42nd floor, she found herself in a hallway that offered only 4 options. 1 penthouse door for each wing of the building. She approached their door and immediately noticed the "Do Not Disturb" placard that hung beside it. She was so nervous, she was shaking. But this couple had completely polluted her days and nights. She had to know what was going on if she ever wanted to get back to reality. She didn't know what she would say when they answered, but she decided she would figure it out as she went. She knocked once with the intention of doing it a second and third time, but when her knuckles connected with the door, it inched open slightly. It hadn't been properly latched. She looked at the opening for over a minute, trying to decide what to do. Clearly, they hadn't heard the knock, as no one came to the door to confront her. Surprising even to herself, she was actually considering letting herself in just enough to get a glimpse. She decided against the idea initially, but as she reached for the knob to close the door, she couldn't help herself. She shifted it open a little further, just enough to see inside. There was a small table in the center, and on the top were dozens of photos and documents. She'd come this far. She needed something to satisfy her insatiable interest. She approached the table and began to peruse the contents. The photos were all of the couple in the window, but the images were all from afar, as if whoever had taken them had done so without their knowledge. Bev's stomach started to turn as she read through the documents. Every one a piece of evidence. Evidence of an affair. It wasn't the affair itself that unsettled her. It was the fact that someone had collected evidence of it and had compiled it right here in the home of the man involved. She set the papers down and began to take steps backward as quietly as she could. But a noise behind her forced her to a complete stop. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Bev was frozen, the fear infiltrating every cell. She was caught. But that wasn't what frightened her. It was what she had walked into. She turned slowly, being careful to control her movements. As she did, she found herself face to face with the barrel of a pistol. The man holding it was calm, but in a way, perplexed. Like he wasn't sure exactly what to do with this discovery. "I'm sorry," she started to say. What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. I cleaned the apartment across the street, and She couldn't find the words, and any she did came out mumbled through her now shaking lips. She'd never seen a gun in person before, much less had one trained on her face. She couldn't think, and she could hardly breathe. He raised his free hand and rubbed his forehead as if working through a complicated mathematical equation. "Move," he said. "What?" "I said move. Into the dining room," he said, waving the gun in the direction she was to go. She did as she was told, inadvertently holding her hands in the air like she was under arrest. She knew it was silly. She would have felt much better if a police officer were detaining her versus what she was currently experiencing. As she emerged into the dining room, the couple she'd been watching for over a week came into view. They had to hear her enter, but they didn't dare move, and Bev believed she already knew why. "Douglas, Denise, we have an unexpected guest," he said. Still, they didn't move. Bev waited for a verbal confirmation that they were even alive. But then she saw the woman he'd called Denise's throat catch slightly as she fought to control her breathing. "I think introductions are in order. Why don't you go first?" he said, poking Bev in the back with the gun. I'm Bev Thomas. I just clean the apartment across the street." "Perhaps you'd like to tell us exactly why you've intruded upon our evening of wonders and romance." "Bev Thomas. I noticed them having dinner in the same spot all last week, and You were nosy," the man said, finishing her sentence. I was concerned. You didn't mean what? To break into this apartment? To impose somewhere you weren't welcome? But you did it anyway, didn't you? Bev Thomas. You know what, though? That's okay. You see, you and I are a lot alike. Curious. You were curious about this beautiful couple. So was I. You can imagine just how curious I was when I discovered that my wife of 15 years was having an affair with a wealthier, more attractive, and apparently more adventurous man. Bev didn't know what to say. Her fears were being confirmed, but that didn't bring her a single ounce of relief. For once, she wished she'd been wrong. Since they can't answer for themselves, allow me to complete the introductions. Douglas Allen, my wife's new lover. My darling wife, Denise. As for me, my name is about as important as our marriage was to my whore of a wife. Again, Bev stayed quiet. You must be wondering what exactly you happened upon tonight. Bev Thomas, let me illuminate you. You see, I have been tracking this forbidden love affair for over 2.5 years. Every meetup, every email, every middle of the night phone call that my wife took from the downstairs bathroom as if I wouldn't hear. Everything. I was so moved by the greatest love story ever told that I figured, why not recreate it? Let the lovebirds live through it all one more time. We've been at it for weeks, Bev. Day and night. Every dinner date, every intimate conversation, every single moment of sexual engagement. All of it on replay, like a show on Broadway. The obvious difference is an audience of only one to enjoy it, he said, referring to himself. She doesn't have anything to do with this, Mike. Just let her leave. Denise's sudden outburst startled Bev so much that she almost jumped. The woman in the window had finally broken her silence. The man called Mike was still behind her, so Bev couldn't see his face. Even so, she could feel the anger radiating off him like heat from a bonfire. What is the rule, Denise? What is the fucking rule? She didn't respond, nor did she look away from Doug Allen. Her face was expressionless, but her eyes told the story all on their own. It was clear to Bev that Denise was overrun with fear. She'd messed up, and she knew it. Bev flinched as Mike's footsteps met her ears. He moved around her, making his way toward Denise, slowly and methodically, like a hungry tiger closing in on a wounded antelope. I asked you a question, he said calmly as he arrived at the table. Again, she refused to answer. Mike sighed heavily and pulled something from his pocket. Before it registered what he had retrieved, the blade of the folding knife had flipped open and had been driven through Doug's hand, nailing it to the tabletop. Doug screamed out in pain, and Denise did the same. All the fear, anger, and misery exploding out of her. Look what you made me do, you whore. You worthless bitch. You couldn't follow a simple set of fucking rules. Don't break character. Ever. You've ruined the entire sequence. When he was done, he collected himself and turned back to Bev. She expected he was about to explain the rules of engagement in this little game he'd created. But he stopped realizing what he had done. Years of tracking, months of planning, weeks of playing out his fantasy of revenge, and he'd never made a mistake. Until now. He turned back around as quickly as he could, but it was too late. Denise had already pulled the knife from Doug's hand. As his front side became exposed, she drove the knife deep into his chest. He gasped and began to stumble backwards. She followed him onto the floor, where she pulled the blade out and then stuck it in again. Then again, and again. Doug nursed his wounded hand, and Bev watched, frozen in time, as the slaughter ensued. When she no longer had the strength to pull the knife out, and Mike was fighting for his last few breaths, she moved up to his head and whispered something in his ear. His eyes went wide, then slowly shut, as the final bit of life departed from his body. What happened next was a whirlwind of police sirens, flashing lights, EMTs, and crime scene technicians. People in uniform taking Bev's statement again and again. Paramedics checking her for injuries, the flash of cameras as evidence was documented and collected inside the penthouse. She couldn't bring herself to say much of anything, but she hung on every word as Doug and Denise detailed what they had been through while captives of a madman, driven to the edge of sanity by pure rage and jealousy. When the police had finished their questions, and just before the pair were swept off by an ambulance to receive further medical attention at the hospital, Bev had time to ask one single question. She approached the back of the ambulance and looked up into Denise's eyes. "There is so much I don't understand. I'm glad you're both okay. But what did you say to him?" At the end, Denise smiled to herself, like she was about to reveal a childhood secret she'd always promised to take to the grave. She leaned down close so that she could whisper and still be audible. "I told him the truth, that Doug and I knew he was following us for months, and we kept at it anyways. I told him that it made it that much more exciting that he was seeing everything we were doing, and it just made us want to do it that much more. I told him that, and I told him that the only thing better than Doug and I tearing into each other with him knowing was doing it all over again in front of his pathetic face." Before she could say anything more, the paramedics came and secured the doors. Bev watched, speechless, as the ambulance pulled away. Since she didn't have any injuries, she didn't need to go to the hospital. Instead, she went back to the apartment she was supposed to be cleaning. Lost in thought, she wandered over to the window, looking up to an empty table in the penthouse across the street, where she'd first seen the couple in the glass. "I dreamed of heaven. There's a smell to death. And I'm not talking about the stench of rotting fat and escaping gases. It's the smell of death's presence. It changes the air molecules to make them sour. They slice your nose as you inhale, and they grate against your skin as you walk through its cloud. The effect lingers. The more bodies, the more intense it is, like a heat map of last breaths. There wasn't a pure atom in the basement. It was suffocating. I was sitting against the wall, my dead eyes pointed to the sky, and my dropped chin pointed to Earth's core. My hands were blue, and my face was pale. My legs were twisted in such an uncomfortable way, but there was nothing I could do. Literally. I couldn't even breathe, because there was no breath to circulate, and my blood could no longer flow, because most of it was on the wall, so it seemed that I would be uncomfortable for eternity. But what's new? Even when I used to lay in the most comfortable position on a bed of clouds and fat puppies, it would only take an hour before I was forced to move again. Comfort is only a distant hope, after all, occasionally swooping down to give us a kiss on the cheek, only to fly away again. It offered a good chase, at least, but now it's gone, and it's never coming back. I can see its wings flap and flap, but its image only shrinks. Goodbye, little bird, and so my legs will stay. I don't even know who these people are next to me, beyond being an undesirable, of course. I always thought it would be my wife or children. Hell, even a neighbor in their place. But who are they? I don't know them. I've never seen them in my life, except maybe a passing glance or so. And yet, here they are. No one would ever want to imagine their coffin being shared with strangers. It's not fitting, I'll tell you that. And who pulled the trigger? I didn't recognize any of them either. When a man is put in such a position as I, isn't the smallest, most bare minimum honor you could give him is to at least let him see a familiar face before the black veil is draped. Even a simple photograph would suffice. Does their cruelty know no bounds? And what a disgusting day for it to happen. A clear, warm week ahead without a cloud on the radar. Yet they chose the only stormy day as the day. The rapping of the rain against the basement window was incredibly distracting, and all I had to do was stand still. I can't imagine the ruckus for the men with the job, but alas, it goes how it goes, just as it always does. Nothing new, nothing new. When my consciousness expired, there was a very bright light, just as you're told that you would see. It was like I was tied to the nose of a rushing train that was exiting a tunnel. I wasn't scared. I was intrigued, I suppose, but weary. It didn't seem like the light was growing as you'd expect, but it was still clear that we were bound to collide. And so we did. I then entered a still ocean, hovering over it, as if I was sitting on top of a floating rug. I looked around, and there was nothing that rose above the floor of shimmering water, completely level. I waited for some sort of figure to appear, an angel or guide, but no one came. I was alone. There was a thick white fog, more of a cream color, actually, and it was smothering everything, especially the horizon. The sky was the same color. I suppose it was more of a calm mist than a fog, if that makes sense. I stayed above the water, simply watching the mist, and I found myself entirely at peace. There was no tension or wonder. It felt right, natural, ethereal. Then the day succumbed to a wicked night. Everything was dark and ugly. But something in me knew everything was there, just as it was earlier. The water danced in an invisible moonlight, and due to the darkness, it was no longer water, but an eerie liquid. For the first time, I became aware of the possibility that the liquid might touch me, and it was terrifying. I couldn't say why. It's the same experience as seeing a familiar item in your bedroom turn into a demon when the lights go off. You know what it is and what it isn't, but you have nothing to prove it. And so, it was a demon. I found myself on the run again, but the reins were still out of my control. I soared through the dark mist to a sort of cave with a light echoing from its depths. Yet this light was only an illuminance in its vibrancy and not color. It was blacker than anything else in sight. You could shine the most intense beam of real-world light into the cave's exhaust, and the darkness would devour every ounce of it. There was no overshadowing its power. I was slurped into this cave like blood down a drain, and when I woke, I was surrounded by 4 things. They were human in their shape and size, but their faces and direct appearance were revolting, like bloody brain matter paired with the sensation of swallowing a razor blade. It's impossible to convey their grotesqueness, and they were in pain. They were suffering, whatever they were. I was lying flat on the cave floor, looking at them, all standing over me. They were studying me in teary-eyed horror. Just as I studied them, they were afraid and sad and grossed out. I was a brutal crime scene, and they were an innocent child. Their spirits yearned for an opportunity of hesitation, while their bodies functioned autonomously. They lifted me up like I was in a stretcher. Then they carried me through the cave, mostly keeping their vision to their path of travel, but occasionally sneaking a glance against their will at whatever I was to them. They placed me on a cold table and backed off, fighting themselves to sever the tie between their eyes and me. Then they were gone. All I could see was a wet cave ceiling. I knew a figure was next to me. I closed my eyes. It rolled its feet as it moved along my left side, doing seemingly nothing other than being present and busy. I don't know if it wanted me to open my eyes. It dared me to, but I would never. The ringing of complete silence was giving me the feeling of a terrible migraine. I couldn't relax because the figure was there, so I stayed alert and ready, as if there were some sort of instructions to be heard or questions to be asked. But there were none. No sound, no feel, only dread. Something was coming. Something was going to happen. It was racing to me. But there was nothing outside of the expectation of it to tell me. The figure paced. I didn't know what the figure looked like, and I would never dare to satisfy that curiosity. It wanted me to see it so that it could punish me, like a bully hovering in your peripheral vision, waiting for you to make eye contact so it could warrant abuse. But the figure, what abuse was in its arsenal? I was inflating with the shivers of dread, the heat of its vibrations cooking me like a bowl of popcorn. The figure was by my feet, my unprotected, naked feet. It wasn't doing anything yet, but of course, it was getting ready for something. Something big. I never realized how soft and sensitive the skin on my feet was. Until then, I expected the Lord to be here, but he wasn't. What are the rules if the rules I lived by didn't work? I don't even know if I had skin or a body or anything other than my perception. I would never open my eyes to see. If my skin was still attached, it must have shaken itself loose by now. Trembles of this magnitude would bring down even the strongest city. It's on my right side now. What's it doing there? Why there? My left side is empty, exposed, naked. There's fidgeting behind me. Metallic clinking, shuffling. But it's delicate and gentle. There's no rush to it, like an assassin taking his time to thread on a suppressor. His mind is in the clouds, and his hand is on the gun. How could one smile in a time such as that? The figure isn't smiling, though, I'm sure. It's all business for it, nothing more. A freezing chill tickles my scalp, near where the figure is hovering. What is it doing? Wait. It left. There's no door to close, but some sort of barrier is now between it and me. It's gone, but I can still feel it moving through the cave, as if I have a map of its layout. I'm alone. My eyes will stay shut. I've decided it. I'm not risking it. Not for anything. It'll come back. The figure, it'll come back without a doubt. It's getting something for me. I know it. But what? Or is that it? Is it done? Or will there be more? Has it even started yet? What is it? I don't know anything, but I know enough to not be ignorant. There's something coming. It's on its way. But why am I here? What is here? Does everyone go here? Oh, it's back. The figure is back. The Unnatural Diary. Part 1. The Unintended Discovery. Dust swirled in the dim light as Sarah pushed aside a stack of brittle newspapers, her fingers brushing against something unexpected. Soft, worn leather. She reached into the box of forgotten books and relics, pulling free an old, weathered diary. Its edges were frayed with time, the cover nearly stripped of its once proud embossing, now smooth and cool beneath her touch. A faint residue of salt clung to its surface, as if it had weathered years of quiet decay or been touched by the sea itself. Intrigued, she carefully pried it open near the middle, where thick, textured pages crackled with age. The paper felt different, denser than usual, almost like parchment. The ink, though faded, carried an unusual shimmer, as if the words still pulsed with some lingering energy, revealing a chilling passage. I had to move quickly, but the floorboards betrayed me, groaning beneath my steps as I crept through the darkened hall. It was close. I could feel its snarling breath, cold and damp, seeping through the walls, making them feel thinner than they were. The air was thick with the weight of its presence. I had to make it to the kitchen. I had to get to the closest bag of consecrated salt before it was too late. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. The words read like a story, yet something about them felt strangely real and weren't meant to entertain, but to warn. She flipped another page, the dry parchment whispering as it moved, and something slipped loose. A note, a single yellowed slip of paper, fluttered to the attic floor. Sarah bent to retrieve it, her pulse quickening as she read the hastily scrawled words. "If you've found this, it already knows. It already knows?" The words sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. What does that mean? What already knows? Shaking off the unease, she set the diary aside, convincing herself it was just a very old diary. Nothing more. She returned to cleaning, determined to finish the task before indulging her curiosity. Later, with the attic finally organized, Sarah sank into the old desk chair she had recently dusted off and pulled from the corner. It paired well with an antique desk she had just cleaned off, a piece that had likely sat buried beneath clutter for years. Exhaustion giving way to curiosity, she reached for the diary, opening it to the first page, her fingers brushing over the worn pages, coming to the inside of the cover, where a passage so intimate it felt as though she was intruding on something deeply personal, was scrawled in elegant handwriting. "To my beautiful Colette, may the enchantment of these pages cradle your precious memories and bridge the distance between us, keeping our hearts forever intertwined with eternal love. Roderick Shadowthorn of Moonvale Hollow." Beneath the inscription, in a more delicate script, another line had been added. "Given to me by my love on Saturday, February 28th, 1953. Sarah's pulse quickened. The names, Roderick Shadowthorn, Moonvale Hollow, felt almost otherworldly, like something plucked from a forgotten fairy tale. Sarah turned to the first entry, March 2nd, 1953. "My dearest new diary, I am excited to begin writing. I can scarcely believe my fortune. Has it only been weeks since I met Roderick? It feels as though I have known him forever, as though our souls recognized one another long before our eyes had ever met. He is unlike anyone I have ever known. His presence is both briskly confident and gentle, and his words laced with a wisdom as though he has seen lifetimes beyond my own. Fascinates me. When I am with him, the world feels richer and brighter, as if I have stepped beyond the veil and into something wondrous. His world is unlike anything I could have imagined. Mystical, brimming with enchantment and secrets woven through everything there. He speaks of things I cannot yet comprehend, yet I believe every word. When he takes my hand, I swear I can feel the pulse of something ancient and powerful. He calls himself a hermit. Or rather, that's what others call him. But to me, he is nothing short of extraordinary. Everything about him is mesmerizing. His long, dark waves that frame his face, the depth of his warm brown eyes, and oh, the way he looks at me, as if I am the only thing that exists in his world. It sends my heart racing, my breath catching in my throat. I have never felt so seen, so cherished. If this is love, then let me remain lost in it forever. I do not know what the future holds, nor how we will balance our lives together. But I know I wish to be with Roderick forever, and I will follow wherever this enchantment leads, forever hopeful. Colette. Wow. Sarah exhaled the word, unable to stop the tinge of jealousy creeping into her voice. To feel that in love, to be cherished like that. She had once known that feeling, back when she and Neil were still wrapped in the bliss of their early days. But those days had faded, worn thin by time and disappointment, until all that remained was silence and a divorce finalized 3 years ago. Now, her world revolved around work, the occasional night out with friends, and a growing reluctance to let anyone get too close again. She shook off the thought and turned the page, only to feel as though something else was guiding her hand. The diary fell open to a blank page, yet at the top, written in the same elegant script, a date had already been inscribed. March 15th, 2025. Sarah's breath hitched. Her pulse pounded in her ears. That's today's date. She stumbled back, nearly losing her balance. Her mind raced for an explanation, but none made sense. The diary was old, decades old. How could this be? A chill swept through the attic, and she rubbed her arms, trying to shake the unease pressing against her chest. It's just a coincidence, a weird, creepy coincidence. Forcing a nervous laugh, she muttered, "Okay, that's enough reading for today. I just need a shower, food, and..." Before she could finish, a brilliant light erupted from the diary, flooding the attic in a blinding radiance. The air crackled, thick with an energy she could feel rushing over her skin. A high-pitched hum filled her ears as the pages of the diary flared open, their edges glowing with an unnatural heat. Sarah barely had time to scream before the light consumed her. Then, silence. The attic stood empty. The diary lay undisturbed on the desk. A new entry had appeared on the once blank page. March 15th, 2025. I could sense a release. The connection to her world is back. It seems different somehow. Oh, how I can't wait to see her again. What is this? She opened it? Who is she? She has dared to open Colette's diary. She will answer for this. She will. The sentence trailed off, the ink still wet, as if waiting to be finished. Part 2. The vanished sister. As the last of the evening sun faded into a moonless sky, Gloria settled in beside her husband, the familiar hum of their favorite television show filling the room. The night was calm, uneventful, until the phone shattered the quiet with a sharp trill. Gloria glanced at the caller ID. A slight frown creased her brow. Miranda? Sarah's friend? Why would she be calling? Perplexed, she rose from the couch, murmuring to her husband, "I'll be right back." Pressing the phone to her ear, she answered hesitantly. "Hello? Miranda? Hey, Gloria. I'm sorry for calling so late." Miranda's voice wavered, the hesitation in her tone setting Gloria instantly on edge. "I got your number from Sarah's records," and Gloria's throat tightened. Sarah's records? We were wondering if everything was okay with her. She hasn't been to work in about a week, and we're starting to get worried. We've tried calling, leaving messages, but she hasn't answered. This isn't like her at all. And Miranda hesitated before continuing, her voice barely above a whisper. She missed an important deadline for a major project on Wednesday. Gloria gripped the phone tighter. Sarah? Missing work? Ignoring calls? Failing to meet a deadline? The words barely registered as the realization slowly settled into fear. She hadn't spoken to her sister in nearly 2 weeks. That wasn't unusual for them. Life had a way of pulling them in different directions, but Sarah not showing up for work and no word to anyone, that was impossible. That was not Sarah, and suddenly, the quiet night didn't feel so peaceful anymore. The familiar rhythm of her world began to close in. Where is my sister? By the time the police got involved, Gloria had already exhausted every possible explanation. Even Sarah's ex-husband Neil had flown into town, trying to find out what he could from their mutual acquaintances and his family in the area. But the more they searched, the deeper the mystery became. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no evidence of foul play. Sarah's car remained parked in the driveway. Her purse sat neatly on the dining table, car keys beside it. The house, meticulously arranged, just as she always kept it. Security footage only deepened the mystery. The last recording showed Sarah arriving home from work last Friday, locking the door behind her, and then nothing. No one entered. No one left, leaving the house feeling eerily undisturbed, as if she had vanished without a trace. Her co-workers, Amalia and Miranda, had been the first to raise the alarm. They knew their friend would not miss work, especially not a major deadline, not without calling, not without an explanation. This was an impossibility for someone as methodical and precise as Sarah. So where had she gone? Then there was the opened diary in the attic, sitting on the antique desk in the attic. Its cracked leather cover bore the weight of years. It wasn't Sarah's. Gloria knew that much. The pages, thick and time-worn, had been left open as if abandoned in haste. And there, scrawled in elegant yet unsettling handwriting, was a date. March 15th, 2025. Last Saturday, the day after Sarah was last seen. The police had skimmed through the diary, dismissing it as nothing more than an old journal Sarah had stumbled upon. Perhaps she had been reading it, maybe even planning to write something inspired by it. After all, she had only moved into the house last October. The previous owner, a woman in her 90s, had passed away the year before, and her children had taken what little they wanted. Antiques, heirlooms, family photographs. The rest had been left behind in their rush to sell the house. But as Gloria sat at the old antique desk staring at the diary, unease slithered through her. She reached for it hesitantly, fingers grazing the worn leather cover. A whisper of movement stirred the air, though the room was still. The moment she picked up the book, a chill pricked deep in her bones. Something told her that Sarah hadn't just disappeared. She had been taken. Part 3, the final entry. Taking a steadying breath, Gloria flipped through the pages, only to have them land on the last recorded entry again. March 15th, 2025. I could sense a release. The connection to her world is back. It seems different somehow. Oh, how I can't wait to see her again. What is this? She opened it? Who is she? She has dared to open Colette's diary. She will answer for this. She will... The ink shimmered in shifting, iridescent hues of black and blue, as if the words were still being formed, not yet complete. A low hum vibrated through the attic, the air thickening with something unnatural. Gloria clenched her jaw. An aching sense of dread settled in her chest. This wasn't just a diary. This was something else. Something supernatural. Sarah, what did you do? With a deep breath, she turned the page and gabba. March 20th, 2025. She keeps running again. I'll find her again. She will tell me where Colette is. She does not belong. She is not Colette. She fights, but she cannot escape. She will stay. If I cannot have my Colette, I found her again. She hides. These people cannot protect her from me. She is strong, but endurance lasts only so long. Gloria's stomach twisted. Sarah was alive, but she wasn't just missing. She was trapped. Somewhere beyond this world, desperation clawed at her chest. There had to be something, some way to help Sarah. Flipping frantically through the brittle pages, she stopped when she found an entry dated April 10th, 1956. The ink was uneven, smudged in places, as though written in haste. April 10th, 1956. I have kept it at bay with consecrated salt. I believe I have found a way to seal this diary. It was forged by Roderick's own hands, a doorway between both worlds. It seems impossible to destroy, but I must protect my husband, my children. The salt has bound the door. He cannot come through that way again. I did love him once, but what he was becoming, now he is lost to rage and darkness. No longer the man I loved. He is something else now. A vile creature. I pray no one ever finds this diary. I have been told, soak cloth in sea salt. Wrap the diary within it. The realms will be severed. If this works, this will be my last entry. If it doesn't, God help me. The smudged words ended abruptly. Gloria's hands trembled as she closed the diary. She knew what she had to do. Colette had sealed the diary once before. Gloria would do it again. Gloria searched the attic, her hands trembling, looking for any salt that may have been left. Thankfully, Sarah had cleaned and organized the space not too long ago, making it easier to find what she needed. But would it work? Would it not only seal the diary, but also bring Sarah back? Her fingers brushed against something cool and metallic. An old tin can with the words "Consecrated Salt" embossed on its worn surface. Inside, a thick, heavy bag of salt remained untouched. Waiting, anxious, Gloria quickly opened the diary to the most recent entry. Her heart pounded as she poured a thick line of salt down the center of the open pages, then traced a protective circle around it. She didn't know what she was doing, but she had to do something. It had already been a week since Sarah disappeared. The air shifted. A strange, oppressive stillness pressed down on the attic. Then, the diary lifted off the desk. A plume of smoke curled from its pages as an eerie glow pulsed from within. The pages flared open, flipping wildly as a gust of wind erupted through the attic. Bolts of crackling light shot from the diary, slamming into the wooden beams and shaking the very foundation of the house. Gloria stumbled back, shielding her face as the attic groaned, the walls pulsating as if the house itself were alive. Then, a scream, low and guttural, full of rage and loss, a scream that was not human. And just as suddenly as it began, everything stilled. The diary dropped to the floor with a final thud, its edges slightly singed. The attic fell silent, the air refreshed into somewhat normalcy. Gloria hesitated before stepping forward. The diary lay motionless, its pages now eerily still. A single final entry had appeared. March 21st, 2025. She is gone. My Colette has left me. I am nothing without her. Oh, Colette. I am so sorry. I loved you so. I waited. You never came. I am no more, finally, released from my agony. Then, without warning, the diary slammed shut. Gloria's breath caught. Where is Sarah? Please, give me my sister back, she cried, voice breaking. A soft thud echoed from downstairs. Heart pounding, Gloria bolted down the steps, and there, lying in the center of the living room, was Sarah. Dazed, shaken, a little battered, but very much alive. Sarah blinked at her, disoriented. Gloria? Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. You're here. What happened? Tears blurred Gloria's vision as she rushed forward, pulling her sister into a fierce hug. Oh, Sarah, you're home. Sarah shuddered against her. I saw him. Roderick, He was a monster, Gloria, twisted by rage. He was searching for Colette, furious that she had betrayed him, that she had moved on, married someone else. Gloria cupped Sarah's face, her thumbs brushing against her cheeks, wiping the tears. "You're safe now. It's over." Sarah's gaze flickered toward the attic door. Her voice was quieter now, wary. "Is it?" Gloria took a slow breath. "I think he finally found peace. After all these years, he was released from his pain." Sarah nodded, but unease lingered in her expression. "Then let's make sure no one ever opens that diary again," Gloria agreed, and without hesitation, they climbed back up to the attic, grabbing the diary. Then, under the moon's watchful glow, they carried it out back, straight to the fire pit. As the flames consumed the aged leather and time-worn pages, an unnatural wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the last echoes of Roderick Shadowthorn of Moonvale Hollow. And for the first time in 70 years, Moonvale Hollow would be forgotten forever, or so they hoped. "The hunt never ends. You thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you?" the note read. The man had shivered when he had read those ominous words, as perspiration began to drip down from his temple, the salty liquid seeping into his eyes and temporarily blinding him. "This is the end," the man had said to himself in an agitated, trembling whisper, as he looked down at the sheet of notepaper which had been left on his office desk. He glanced around at the other employees to see if anyone was looking his way, giving him some indication on who had left the message. But all of them were engaged in their own little world of toting up the facts and figures which were constantly coming through on their computer terminals. What had caused this man to turn deathly white and feel so nauseous? How had those 9 little words on the page that had now turned his world completely upside down come to cause him so much anguish and despair? That unhappy event had happened a week before. So let us now find out what had caused this man, Henry Miller, to end up in this now distressing location where he now found himself. At this moment, he was looking between the slats of a Venetian blind, observing the street outside, and trying as best as he could to remain unseen from the road in front of the building, where he now cringed, frightened out of his wits. How had it come to this, he thought. Last week, he didn't have a care in the world. All was going well at work. And then came that note, and he found himself involved in something that had instantly changed his life. And now he was on the run, constantly looking over his shoulder, and at this moment hiding in this abandoned building, a structure that had a large sign outside stating that it was condemned and would shortly be torn down. So, how long could he remain here before he had to find another place of sanctuary? The year is 1948. The war is over. After 6 years of bloodshed and butchery, by a psychopath and his evil, willing collaborators, during which an estimated 80 to 100 million people had died or been murdered. The Nuremberg trials had finished, and many, many hundreds of German Nazi war criminals had found justice on the end of a rope for crimes against humanity. Then, there were some who had decided that a cyanide pill was a much quicker way to escape the noose of retribution. Others, seeing that the end was near, had made their getaway before the Russians entered Berlin and tortured them, finding their way to South America, where many of them lived for a while, trying to evade the men from the Simon Wiesenthal organization, people dedicated to finding every last Nazi and bringing them to justice, headed by their leader, a man known as the Nazi Hunter, who was a Holocaust survivor. Even though many years have passed, the hunt still goes on, still finding those vile and depraved monsters, a subspecies of the human race. Although some are well into their dotage, justice is still being served. A particular case in point is the case of Adolf Eichmann, who, along with Heinrich Himmler, was the architect of the final solution, where 6 million Jews were sent to the death camps, only to be gassed, their bodies cremated, and the remains crushed. Eichmann was finally located in Argentina in 1961, thinking that after 16 years he was safe. But justice caught up with him, and he met the Grim Reaper on the end of a rope a year later. But returning to Henry Miller, a man who had changed his name from Henrik Mengele and who had managed to escape from his home in Germany to live in Spain, a neutral country, during the war, just after the conflict had begun. The surname he was born with, Mengele, was the same name as the man who was once revered by the Nazi Party for his inhumane and horrific experiments on unwilling participants. The infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele, a man given the name of the Angel of Death, a man, if indeed he could even be called that, who performed appalling and unspeakable experimentation on live inmates of the concentration camp at Auschwitz. Most of those subjects dying a lingering, painful, and agonizing death, all in the cause of making the so-called German master race into a nation of blue-eyed, blonde, Aryan supermen. But what had caused Henry to be reduced to his present situation? It was all due to that one large letter that he had found on his desk just over a week before, which caused him a great deal of torment. He had read the words, his trembling hands trying to stop the shaking that was coursing through his body. The words that read, "You thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you?" For many years, he had feared that maybe someone, somewhere, at some time, might find out about his namesake and make his life a living hell, maybe even murder him, with the idea that he was in some way engaged in the work carried out by that misguided and psychotic mass murderer, and had, somehow, missed out on receiving the same fate that had befallen the other members of the Nazi death squads. But he had been so careful, and had never told anyone of his former name, or his possible relationship to the Angel of Death at Auschwitz. So, how could someone have found out where he lived or worked? The only way out that he could think of was to go on the run, getting well away from anyone he had worked with and from where he had lived. He had no plan, just a crazed idea that he must stay out of sight in this empty building before he made his next move. All sorts of wild ideas coursing through his brain. Thoughts that he had never even dreamt about, up until now, came into his mind. It was a few weeks later in the office where Henry had formerly been employed, a place from which he had mysteriously disappeared sometime previously, without explanation. One of the other employees who had worked with him had just read an article in the newspaper that had shocked him. It mentioned that his former workmate had been found dead in an abandoned building, having seemingly committed suicide by ingesting a cyanide pill. As tears welled up in his eyes, he murmured words that he found extremely difficult to say. "Henry, what happened? Why did you do it? Just as your friends here were organizing a surprise party for your birthday. You tried so hard to keep it a secret, and you thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you? So today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.